Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Crash Bandicoot was a big success, and in total sold close to 7 million copies, landing it among the most sold PS1 games. While I didn't exactly have the best things to say about it last time, I don't want to take away just how well received and how good it was at establishing Crash as a notable franchise. So, only a little over a year later, the Bandicoot was back with Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. If Crash 1 was tripping over the starting line, Crash 2 was leaving the race, getting in your car, and driving through the course while running everyone over. This game's pretty good. Also, did anyone think the moon in the logo was a golf ball as a kid? I'm sorry. Despite how much I enjoyed Crash 3, I wouldn't get around to playing Crash 2 on an emulator until a little before Insane Trilogy came out. Crash 2 is where the series really started getting going, in my opinion. Staples of the series like warp rooms, the process of getting colored gems, death routes, and saving like a normal video game were started here, imagine that. While I do prefer the third game by a lot, I cannot understate just how important Crash 2 was to defining the foundation of the franchise, so let's jump into the game with the story. After the events of the first game, Cortex falls. Thankfully for him, though, we still have a whole series left, so he's not allowed to die. Instead, he falls into a cave containing crystals and takes them back to his lab where he hopes to make a brand new Cortex Vortex, although here it seems to be less of a brainwashing device and more like a giant space laser. Unfortunately, though, his new assistant Hangin tells him that they'll need 25 more crystals to power it. Meanwhile, Crash is chilling with his sister Coco, who just sort of started being a thing, when Coco needs a new laptop battery, and when Crash tries to go get one in the middle of the jungle, nice going dude, he gets teleported away. This is a warp room in which Cortex contacts Crash to convince him the planet is in danger and he needs to collect crystals to help him save it, and Crash just goes along with it since he is extremely stupid. So yeah, now the name of the game is to go to the multiple levels, collect crystals, fight a boss, and then move on to the next warp room to do the same thing. Along the way, Crash gets contacted by Coco trying to tell him that Cortex is evil, which, yeah, no shit, and Crash just sort of goes about collecting crystals anyway, because if he were any more stupid, he wouldn't know how to walk. He also gets contacted by Brio, surprisingly enough, who doesn't work for Cortex anymore, and wants Crash to collect the gems so that way he can use a laser to destroy the new Cortex Vortex. What's interesting is that the animal bosses here, Ripperoo, the Komodo Bros, and Tiny Tiger, they aren't actually working for Cortex here, and were instead sent out by Brio to try and stop you from getting the crystals. In the end, though, Crash ends up defeating both Hangin and Cortex when he was meant to hand the crystals over to them, which I think is hilarious. He was so stupid he ended up collecting the crystals, but due to his sheer idiocy, he didn't commit to Cortex's plan. Crash is literally so dumb that it wrapped back around to doing the good, smart thing. How about that? While we're here, let's talk about our newcomers. Firstly, the two big ones, Coco and Hangin. Now, I find Hangin to be a lot cooler than Brio. His design is like if the guy from Mad was in a freak science experiment, and when you see that missile lodged in his head, it'll leave an impression. Coco is comparably not as cool, she's just the smart one mainly, but I think that works when Crash has an IQ in the negatives, and in trying to contact Crash between levels, she's done more than Tonga contributed already, so I'm fine with that. Fun fact, according to Charles Zembillis, I hope I pronounced that right, who was a concept artist for the original trilogy, Tonga was scrapped in favor of Coco because Sony of Japan didn't want this sexy character being around Crash, so they designed Coco to be more cute instead, which I think is an interesting little tidbit. Next, there's our new boss characters, the Komodo Bros and Tiny Tiger. Tiny was always cool to me for his design. Just looking at him, you can probably gather what his deal is. A brawn over brains type of guy who can decimate you if given the opportunity. The Komodo Bros haven't actually seen any non-spin-off appearances outside of this game to my knowledge. I wanted to go back to that Bandicoot Files book I mentioned last video, because in their description it's mentioned that Waluigi here is kind of the mastermind, getting Wario to do his dirty work. In the boss fight, though, it seems the opposite, with Mo handing back while Joe goes on the attack, which I found interesting. That's the story for the most part, but I want to highlight the presentation again because man, it is an upgrade. It hits as soon as the opening cutscene. Now, I didn't give the first game a hard time for this because the only important cutscene was the opening one, and it was the first game after all, so I figured I'd cut it some slack. Despite this though, it was kinda stilted, the voice acting was nothing to write home about, and all around it just felt awkward. Crash 2 though, man, this opening is animated real nicely for PS1. Very cartoony, the characters are very expressive, and Cortex actually feels like a bit of a threat when he's in his space station. Speaking of which, this is where the Krusty Krab's own Clancy Brown got his start voicing Cortex, and he does great right out the starting gig, and does a real good job of being a threatening Cortex. Honestly, this game does a good job of showing how behind Sonic Adventure was in terms of animation, which is a bit random, but I played it not too long ago, so it reminded me. On top of the cutscenes, general game environments have more variety and look a lot nicer too. We got a great evolution of the jungle and river levels, both of which looking like upgraded versions of their Crash 1 counterparts, with the river levels making good use out of this new jetboard gimmick that I'll talk about later. We also get an evolution of the laboratory stages from Crash 1 with the space station levels near the end of the game. My favorites though have to go to the new level themes. I love the mild snowy theme a lot of levels have, even if they aren't explicitly snow themed. Mainly the bee and boulder levels. Speaking of which, I actually found the boulder levels a lot more memorable this time. There's also the ruin and space levels that are a fun time as well, even if there aren't a ton of ruin levels to go around. My favorites, though, are the snow levels, and surprisingly enough, the sewer levels. Both of these just have a lot of vibrant colors that do a great job showing the graphical power the PS1 was capable of. The snow levels do a good job challenging your platforming and dodging skills, and have some actually fun ice physics. Meanwhile, the sewer levels, what they lack in deep platforming, they make up for in testing your skill in dodging enemies, fun gimmicks, and when you're going for all boxes, even your navigation skills. I do stand by Crash 1 being a good-looking game for the time, but Crash 2 is a game that I still think looks great. Now, as for the gameplay, we have an entire laundry list of improvements and additions to go over, starting with the control. And wow, it's like I'm playing an actual video game. The control feels leagues better than Crash 1. It made all my deaths feel like they were actually my fault, as opposed to the first game, where every death felt like banging my head against the game coding until God threw me a bone. Crash also has some new moves this go-around. There's the slide, which isn't much on its own, mainly used in conjunction with the new crawl to get under hazards or defeat enemies that are only weak to it. That is, until you use the slide jump. What an amazing move. The slide jump adds some versatility into Crash's movement arsenal, allows you to make far jumps, and is simply fun to use. On top of that, there's this unofficial technique called the slide spin jump, where spinning while doing a slide jump gives you even more height, which can be used to either cheese certain challenges or make some harder challenges easier. There's also the belly flop, which is just sort of here. It's only used to break steel crates, which in of themselves only exist because the belly flop exists, which begs the question, why does the belly flop exist? You can enter a few hidden pathways using the belly flop, but it isn't that important, especially when it's being introduced alongside the almighty slide. Speaking of crates, we also get the introduction of the nitro crates here, which explode on contact. They also bring with them the nitro detonation switches. Since the nitros count for the box gem but can't be touched, you press these to blow up all the nitro crates in the level. Nice. Crash 2 is also where we start getting introduced to more alternate gameplay styles. Crash 1 only had one alternate gameplay style, that being the hog riding levels. I only mentioned these in passing in the previous video because there were only two of them, meaning that even if I wanted to complain about the control being a little funky in those stages, it only took up like 8 minutes of total game time, so it wasn't that important, and I had bigger fish to fry with Crash 1. Crash 2 brings in 3 new gameplay styles. We got Polar, the Jet Ski, and the Jetpack. Polar is basically just an improved version of the Hog, moves better, has more interesting level design, and does a dash and a long jump, and the most important part, he's just a lot cuter than the Hog, come on. Plus he even dispenses extra lives if you're a terrible person. Like me. The Jet Ski is alright, makes for a nice shake-up of things, and I do enjoy their levels, it's just not something I'm begging to replay. Either way though, I do have fun with these, which is more than I can say for the Jetpack. The Jetpack isn't a horrible idea. Yep, that's it. This thing controls so weirdly that I end up inching through the stage and the whole thing becomes a slog. You move up, down, left, and right with the D-pad, move forward with X, and back with circle. It's just awkward trying to get through these, and the worst part is that it's only the control that ruins these, because other than that, the stages are designed well and don't have anything annoying. Thankfully, there's only 2 of these, both in the final warp room of the game, since it's easily the worst gimmick here. Oh yeah, this game also introduced the warp room setup that would become a thing for a lot of these games. You get 5 levels that you can play in any order. Once you get the crystal in all the levels, you fight a boss, then move on to the next tier. Crystals are a new collectible, and since they're required, they aren't something that you need to try to grab, and with minimal examples, are always on the main path. If you look at the outside of the level, you can see what collectibles it has, and you might notice that alongside the box gems, there's also colored gems, and even sometimes a second clear gem. To begin with the box gems, you can die. Yup, drown 'em, falling pits, get crushed, who cares? When you get to the end, you'll still have that gem. On top of that, you can now see the amount of boxes you've broken in the level, although you can't see the total boxes in the stage. That won't be a thing till Crash 3, so it isn't that useful, but it's just a nice addition to have. Another change to the box gem is bonus stages, which have been reworked now to be found through bonus platforms and have their boxes count for the gem. It's more so just an interesting oddity to realize that they didn't count in Crash 1. I always found that a bit weird, but as we've established, Crash 2 is doing God's work right now. Colored gems have also been changed to now you have to complete some challenge or find a secret to get them. Colored gems are also now mostly found in a level before the one it's needed in to reduce backtracking, which is nice. Thanks to the warp room setup, now even if it isn't found in the level before it's needed, you could just go out of order, get the colored gem first, then go to the stage you originally wanted. The secondary clear gems are similar to the colored gems, where they're either hidden away or behind a challenge, stuff like getting to the end within a time limit or even getting through these new death routes. Death routes are like the no death requirement in Crash 1, but done in an actually fun and interesting way. Some stages will have death route platforms on them, and all you gotta do is get to the platform without dying. This then takes you to an alternate route that has a clear gem on it, and sometimes extra boxes, but we'll talk about that later, because when that happens, it's kind of annoying. So, I got multiple reasons why this is better than the no death requirement in Crash 1. First off, it isn't a thing for every level, which means it doesn't become fatiguing as the game goes on. Secondly, when they are in a level, they're never further than halfway through it, and seeing as this game doesn't have any levels that go on for 5 years like Sunset Vista, that's perfectly manageable. Finally, third, once you land on the death route platform, if you die, the platform doesn't go away. It doesn't matter if you die on the death route itself or even outside of it. If you've already ridden the platform, it'll stick around, which is great. I mean, the way I see it, if you've gotten to the death route platform once and then die in some way, you've already proved you're capable of getting to the platform, so what would be the point of gating you off afterward? Now for the final new addition, taking a page out of Super Mario World's playbook, we have secret exits now. Getting to a secret exit spits you out in this hidden warp room where you might have a route to get more boxes for the box gem in the level in question, a route to the stage's colored gem, or even a completely new stage. I really like the secrets in this game. A lot of them are hidden creatively, foreshadowed well, and still make you feel like you figure it out yourself despite the game nudging you in the direction. Why would there be a stair of nitro boxes here if you can't touch them? They don't even bounce around like normal nitros do. While climbing them teleports you to where the purple gem is. Why is there a random platform in the middle of the water here? Well, bouncing on the boxes to get to it opens up a secret exit. I could probably get back to where I dropped off Polar from here, and sure enough, landing on Polar is another secret exit. It's really cool, but with that being said, this game isn't perfect, and secret exits are actually partly to blame. It's really cool, but it also leads to most of the backtracking you have to do in this game, with you being unable to get the box gem in some stages without finding the secret entrance for it first. It's kinda like a not as frequent version of the colored gem issue in Crash 1. Admittedly, I don't have a problem with it as much here because of the improvements to control and box gems I mentioned earlier, and with the levels that require backtracking being much more infrequent. In fact, one of these happens to be getting the red gem from Snow going. If you get tricky, you can actually skip this backtrack, which was super cool when I first found out. It still isn't great, but it's leagues better than what Crash 1 had going on. But when Crash 2's levels get really bad, they can be extremely annoying and have a whole lot of back and forth. Cold Hard Crash is everyone's go-to example, and Actually, you know what? I don't hate this level. I mean, sure, it's hell to grab all the boxes on your first run, but once you know what you're doing, I think it provides a nice little puzzle to solving what route you should take and when. And the challenge in between, I think, was difficult but fair. That one hidden box in the bonus room is bullshit, though. Nah, man, for me, digging it, pisting it away, and Night Fight were the absolute worst of it. Both of them exemplify the problem Crash 2 has in making you backtrack through levels for the sake of breaking all boxes. The pits, the sewer levels, even Cold Hard Crash to an extent make you deal with this. Pisting it away is probably most people's second least favorite level behind Cold Hard Crash, but I found it to be the best out of the three. That still doesn't make it good, though. You have to go through the entire level, and then right as you get to the end, backtrack to the death route platform to hit the rest of the boxes, as well as the nitro detonation switch. This includes needing to leave this guy over here alive, so you can bounce on him to get over the giant wall here. Thankfully, I think I remember being able to slide spin jump over this wall so that you aren't forced to jump on the enemy, but I didn't do it for this run, so I can't verify that. On top of that, if you die in the death route early on, you'll need to backtrack to the platform again because there isn't a checkpoint for a while on the death route. Remember, this is the easiest of the three for me because so help me God, Night Fight is even worse. The difference between Night Fight and pisting it away is that at least the latter just relied on me being able to do some difficult shit in a row that was mildly annoying. Night Fight only has one difficult section, but that one section is completely out of my hands and requires me both doing something really difficult and then getting really lucky on top of it. There's this one section where the path splits, one with the death route, one with the normal path. The easiest solution is to grab the gem on the death route and die, but there are two boxes right at the end of the path, on top of more boxes on the normal route. So what do? Well, the easiest way I found was for me to go through the normal route, then get to the checkpoint after it, and backtrack through the end of the death route to get the two boxes I need. Here's the luck-based part, because by doing this, you'll have used the Firefly that gives you light, leaving you completely in the dark until you get to the next Firefly. So what's the plan? There is no plan. I just slide jumped like a maniac until God rewarded me for my effort and let me live. I'm more so just surprised that people don't talk about this level when discussing the annoying parts of this game, because this was a real pain in my ass. Then there's Diggin, the king of annoying-ass backtracking, another path split with a death route, and this time both paths have a bunch of boxes along them. So you have to go through the entirety of both of these paths, and the worst part is the bees that come at you extremely fast from off-screen. At the very least you can listen to hear when they're coming, but it still isn't fun dealing with them. This wouldn't be a problem if not for the camera not showing you what's behind, just like in Crash 1, so you end up having to inch your way along to avoid pits, and sometimes you end up dying anyway. This is especially aggravating because one of the ruined stages has an alternate route where you have to go towards the camera, and it zooms out a bit so that you can better gauge what's ahead. I just wish this zoomed out camera was integrated when you have to do backtracking, because the problem isn't moving back through the level in of itself, it's how the camera makes it such a cumbersome task. Thankfully, those were the only major annoyances this game had, definitely making this an overall more fun experience than Crash 1, with just some bumps in the road. Bosses are also back and they got quite an improvement. Like Crash 1, none of them are particularly difficult, although I spent like 10 full minutes beating Engine this go, that doesn't usually happen. But the bosses here are a lot more interesting and cool than pretty much every boss in Crash 1. My favorites have to be Ripperoo, Tiny, and Engine's fights. Ripperoo wasn't anything crazy, I just thought it made for a fun encounter to kick the game off with, similar to his fight in the first game. Tiny also isn't anything special either, I just think guiding him to fall into the pits is satisfying. Engine definitely has the most going on. You have to throw Wumpa Fruit at pieces of his robot when they're exposed, and he's always switching up his method of attack as you break more pieces of the robot, giving the fight some nice variety. The only ones I don't feel much about are the Komodo Bros and the final fight against Cortex. The Komodo Bros are just kinda boring, you stand around waiting for your turn to attack most of the time, only needing to slightly move your way out of an attack on the occasion. Cortex, on the other hand, I haven't played every Crash game, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this is the worst final fight in the series. He doesn't attack, he can only win by getting to the end, which takes forever. All the obstacles in your way only stop you instead of killing you, and it's over in less than a minute. The only challenging part of this fight is piloting the jetpack to get over to him. Also, I just realized if you got the good ending in Crash 1, this would technically be your first time fighting Cortex. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that last time. If you got all the gems, you could beat the game without fighting the final boss, which was really weird. The good ending here for getting all the gems is much more rewarding, as you get to use Embryo's super laser to destroy the Cortex vortex, and you actually get to, fight the final boss before doing this. Then it's also more rewarding just because the process of doing this in Crash 2 was way more fun than in the first game. Finally, we gotta talk about the music. I really appreciate Crash 1's more atmospheric approach to the soundtrack, and I think it works really well for that game, but Crash 2 ups the energy, making for much more fun and memorable music. The snow, boulder, and polder levels have some of my favorites, and even some of the smaller tracks stick out to me this time too, like the bonus room themes. This is a small detail, but I like how the bonus rooms and death routes have their themes slightly altered depending on the theme of the level it's in. They both get remixed and incorporate the signature sounds and instruments from its level theme. Take the sewers, for example. The bonus theme gets changed to have that metallic clanging in the background that can be heard in the main track. It's cool. Basically, to sum it up, I think Crash 1's soundtrack works really good in the context of the game, meanwhile Crash 2's works well in the game and is also good to listen to outside of it. With that, we've reached the end of Crash 2, and this is the quintessential example of a great video game sequel in my opinion. It refines everything from the previous installment while at the same time injecting so many of its own new ideas to both keep it fresh and move the series forward. It's plain to see Crash 2 did a good job with this by how almost everything it added became mainstays of the series. From Crash's new moves to the nitro crates, death routes, the way bonus rooms work, the warp rooms, everything stated here we'll be seeing for many other games going forward. Next time, we'll be closing out the PS1 trilogy of Crash games with Crash Bandicoot Warped. I got a lot to say about this one, so I hope you'll join me for that. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the video, take care, and I will see you all later.